Okay, I hope you're all ready. I hope you got your tea, your coffee, your water. It will take approximately, yeah, I'd say 90 minutes, a little bit less than 90 minutes from here on. And again, just want to make sure that all the questions you have, all the experience you've made on this topic, if there's something specific, that I give you the space to share that as well. That's the little agenda. Again, I'll be able to move a little bit to different sides depending on what it is you actually need. We dive into the general topic of communication, culture as a filter, some reflection prompts I've prepared for you. And in the end, I'll share some effective tools on how to communicate. I want to emphasize, by the way, that all what I'm sharing today, like, is out of my experience, like the experience out of my relationship with my Argentinian husband, but also the experience of all the couples I've interviewed over the past few years. I am not a therapist. I'm actually becoming a couples coach. I'm in training right now. So just to give you a little heads up that there might be the one or the other topic where you feel like you want to do a deep dive on with an expert. So everything we're going to talk about today is to give you an idea on what communication is and how to communicate a little bit more efficiently in your relationship, but also to understand your own ways of communicating. That's actually the most important because sometimes we feel like we're expecting our partner to understand what we're going through, to understand how we feel, and to understand the way we're thinking. Sometimes even for us, it's difficult to find the right words on communicating how we're actually doing and why we feel the way we're feeling. So it all starts with really like doing a deep dive on what you're feeling, why you're thinking the way you do think, where it's coming from, because some things are culture related, some things are just depending on your upbringing, depending on the way you were raised. You've made your very own personal experience. And throughout your journey on this topic, like, there is no right and wrong. It's all about like understanding where you're coming from. And most importantly, once you got to the point to understand where you're coming from, to understand why you communicate the way you do in specific scenarios, to be able to communicate that as well. So that's obviously also part of communication, being able to communicate how you're feeling, what you're going through. And obviously, as I've just mentioned in the beginning today, my energy level is quite low because I'm feeling a little bit sick. So I made sure, for example, to communicate even this towards my husband and be just like, hey, I'm sorry today. I'm going to be a little bit more quiet. This doesn't have anything to do with you. It's just like, I just need my personal space. I know exactly what I need. I'm going to work on the workshop today, so I'm going to lock myself in, but please don't take it personal. And that's a way of communicating as well, connected with understanding where you're coming from and understanding why you feel the way you do. But let's dive into the topic. As mentioned, communication is key. I'm sure you all have heard it already. It's actually very interesting because throughout all the podcast episodes I've had, so the ones who are listening to the podcast as well, I'd ask the individuals and the couples for advice in the end. And 65%, I'd say, or even more, the advice would be communication, because communication is key. And I agree with that. But what does it even mean? Like, what does it mean communication is key? And what is communication? So as you've also might have heard the phrase, like, even though you're not communicating, you're communicating. So communication is not only words. It's also the way you are, like the moment you're rolling your eyes in a conversation, for example, or the way you talk with your hands, or even silence is communication, or the way you text via WhatsApp when you text with your significant other, or what I do, for example, and I know that this is driving Nacho crazy, is if he sends a message or he's asking me something, instead of just answering, yes, I'm fine with that, I would just give him a thumbs up on the message. And for him, it's like passive aggressive, while else for me, it's just like, yeah, I'm agree. Like, let's just go for it. That's just a yes on my end. So it also It depends on how you are interpreting specific actions and specific moments, and to understand again why you are interpreting them the way you do. Like, is it a culture thing? Is it the way you were raised? Maybe you've made an experience in the past in another relationship where a thumbs up would mean, for example, like, hey, that's a passive aggressive reaction because the other person on the other end was annoyed by you. Like, it all comes together with all the experiences we're making in life as well. And it all comes together with really figuring out why it is. Why do you think the way you do? Why do you communicate the way you do? Because only then you are able to also communicate openly towards your partner and making sure that he understands where you're coming from. So yes, every message has a filter. Again, emotional patterns are exactly what I've just described. And also meaning isn't always universal. So for me, for example, coming from Germany, and I'm sure you've all made that experience coming from Germany, my husband from Argentina. When I say like, okay, let's get together in 5 minutes or let's have dinner in 5 minutes, I'm almost done. That means we'll get together in 5 minutes. For him, it's more like 20, 30 minutes. And what I had to learn as well is that he has a different approach when it comes to time. What I also had to understand is that somehow we have to meet in the middle, because time, for example, for me, it's very disrespectful if you're not on time. But I understand that where he's coming from, it's actually very Argentinian to not show up on time. Or, for example, if he says vamos, which means let's go, I know we will not head out directly. It takes 3 vamoses and then we'll head out. So I'll be like, okay, I'll be chilled. I wait for the third vamos and then I'll get up and I'll tie my shoes and we'll go. But you have to tackle those topics in order to understand whether it's a cultural thing, is it a personal thing, is it something like out of your own experience, like where is it actually coming from? If it's really bothering you. And in our case, like it did bother me that we were always the ones while living in Germany that went, like it came too late. We always went late to a party, for example, invited by friends, and then okay, Christina and Nacho, they will not show up on time. For me, it's a matter of respect. For Nacho, it's just like time is more like a suggestion. And I've learned this more and more over the time we are here in Argentina, up to the point where I'm like 5 minutes late to a coffee date with a friend, for example. Because here it's just, yeah, time is just a suggestion. Let's phrase it like this. And I'm sure, Anna, because I know that you're also living in Buenos Aires, you know where I'm getting with that. But again, like we all make different experiences. And it's very, very, very important. Like if you feel like this is a value, this is something that's very important to you, please express it towards your partner. Have an open communication about that. Make sure that your partner understands where you're coming from. Doesn't mean, and we will get back to that later, that he's agreeing on this, but you have to express why you feel that way and what it does to you. For example, when you are late, I feel like when you're late, I get upset. I don't want to get upset over things like this. Can we please work on an agreement, or can we please work it out? So that way your partner is aware that this is a topic, it's important to you, you've explained it to him, and yeah, it's your value, and he might cross a boundary, and also making sure that you're communicating your boundaries as well. The ones who were able to join the workshop on the topic of identity crisis, they might remember that we've been talking about values. So a big part of that workshop back in, I think in March, was topic of values. So really understanding what's important to you. That's actually a topic we will not dive into today, but I'll make sure to include it in the handout in the end of the workshop as well, because it all comes and goes with, again, understanding where you're coming from as well, and understanding what's important to you, and understanding why certain things are triggering. For example, let me just move this. Here we go. And the goal in general is to feel seen and understood. Because we all want to feel seen and understood. We want to be in a safe space. We want to create like a frame with our partner where we feel like we can address everything, where we don't have to be afraid, where we feel like no matter our cultural upbringing, no matter our experiences, we are on the same page after all, even though if we're not agreeing on everything, but we make sure that with that, like within the two of us, we have, Heather's also going to join. Here we go. Within the two of us, there's the safe space where I can be who I am. And I don't have to act like someone I'm not. So if you talk about that with your partner, I'm pretty sure that he will sign that as well. And that's what communication does. And that's the goal of communication, to create a safe space. Sorry, my voice is just cutting off in between. Let's keep on. So culture is actually, a filter. As mentioned in the beginning, even though if you don't communicate, you communicate. For example, in the Argentinian culture, it's very common to talk a lot with your hands. And if you don't speak Spanish and you are in a family setting and there's a table with 20, 30 people, you feel like, okay, they're actually arguing because they're loud, they're screaming, they're very emotional. This is just how they communicate. This is their culture as well. This is what they know. This is how they grew up. So it's very common to scream from one end to the table to the other. And as someone who's not used to that, that might just be very threatened. And you might feel like, okay, I'm in the wrong place. Like this is just not normal. This is not what I know. This is not what I want. What's going on? Also, if you feel that way, open communication. But we will get to that later, because you will find yourself in settings when dating someone from a different country. Actually, you find yourself quite often in settings where just asking yourself like, hey, is this actually normal? And how do I handle that? And I just want you to know that your partner has to know how you're feeling in those situations as well. Maybe not even right away in the situation when being together with his family, for example, but afterwards. For example, I've been talking the other day with a friend of mine, and her in-laws are visiting quite often, very spontaneously. They're just showing up. And that weekend, they had other plans as a couple. They wanted to spend some quality time, but the in-laws called, and 10 minutes later, they were showing up in front of the door. And they spent the day with them. But afterwards, she made sure to address that towards her partner as well, to address it and just to be like, hey, do you think we can find an agreement? Do you think we can find a way to avoid situations like this? Because it makes me feel like they're invading my privacy, and that's definitely nothing that's common in our culture. So how do we tackle that topic? And obviously, it's not a one-day solution, and then from the one day to the other, it will just disappear. It's something that will come up most likely over and over again over the relationship, but it's just important that no matter what it is, that you create a safe space where you feel like you can tackle those topics as well, even though they're not so comfortable to talk about, because your husband might prioritize his family, for example, or your partner differently than you would prioritize your family. I hope that makes sense right now, but I think you understand where I'm coming from. Same with different phrases, different worlds. For example, when I say I'm fine, I'm fine. So there's usually not much room for interpretation. But I've come to the realization, depending on how I'm saying that, depending on how I'm feeling, apparently there is room for interpretation. And to even tackle those topics, like, what does it actually mean when you say you're fine? Are you really fine? Do you need support? Do you have to ask some follow-up questions? Like, what does it mean? Like, open up. So again, those are things that are come along the relationship. I know couples who instantly click on those topics, who instantly are on the same page, where you have the impression like, or you ask yourself, do they actually fight? Like, it's impossible that they're agreeing on everything. But apparently, this is how they roll. They've just, from the beginning, they have a very similar communication style and they understand each other without really explaining themselves too often. Might be that in your relationship it's different, but just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just the way you approach things, and it's the way you especially approach the topics that are especially important to you. And for us, for example, I mean, we're dating since 10 years, married since 8. I'd say to get up to a point where we feel safe, very comfortable, and yeah, in a setting where communication is on point, took around 3 years, I'd say. And we did have disagreements over and over again over the same topics. I often felt, but I also know that Nacho felt the same way because we've been discussing about that afterwards, that sometimes you just feel like you're explaining yourself over and over and over and over and over and over again. And then you just get sick of it. And you're just like, when is my partner getting where I'm coming from? Like, what else does it need? But eventually it just makes click. It's just a conversation you might have to have a couple of times, even though if it's annoying, even though if it's energy taking, but try to be, first of all, kind to yourself and try to be patient with yourself, but also with your partner. Okay, let's come to the part where I'm curious to learn a little bit more about your communication style. I know those are a lot of questions I've prepared here, but I would love for you to take a moment to reflect on your communication style and also on what it is actually you need when you communicate with your partner, whether it is just like daily communication, whether it is like tackling a difficult topic, what is it you need? So therefore, you do have 4 prompts here, and I highly encourage you just to take your time to read over them and to really think for yourself, okay, what is it I need? And I give you a few minutes. So whenever you're ready, you can just share your experience, your needs on all of the prompts or just one of the prompts, because I want to create a space here for you to interact with one another. Because, as mentioned, we are all from different cultural backgrounds, but I'm sure that the experiences we're making, they are very similar. I'm not sure if you have it already, the communication guide, because I remember that some of you got it once I worked on it, and there you will find some topics or some reflection prompts on how to tackle difficult topics. But obviously, both of you have to be willing on working on that. You can't do the work for him, he can't do the work for you. So the question is, are you willing to work on it? And the question is again, is that a boundary he's crossing already? And are you willing to move to the direction of common ground? So some of you I know your personal background story, but I'm wondering in general, what is the biggest challenge for you when it comes to communication in general? God willing, crossing fingers that there's some distance. I know it's a little bit more complex in your situation. So again, what's the biggest hurdle when it comes to communication in your relationship? You think about it. Feel free to share it or just to think about it. Heather's writing, we made a rule that I need to argue in Arabic and he in French, but we really can't. So it's so funny. I love this. So that's just like, again, the best example on how to just go with the flow, find your own way of communication. And I'm sure, Heather, in your case, you had like a few arguments, a few disagreements in order to get there and in order to figure out like, hey, let's make it a little bit more fun, not take everything too serious. Obviously, there are topics that have to be tackled accordingly. Again, your values, making sure that you're not crossing a boundary, but also your partner's not crossing your boundaries. And that's another topic. But yeah, sometimes it's all about learning and going with the flow and a lot of empathy as well. And empathy is not necessarily Like it's putting yourself in the situation of your partner, yes, but it doesn't mean that, again, you're agreeing with everything your partner is saying or the way your partner is thinking. And that's the fun part. Otherwise, honestly, if we wouldn't have those arguments, if we wouldn't have those funny moments of language barriers, so I just see it more like in learning about yourself, learning about a different culture, learning about your partner, learning about how you interact in different settings, rather than, well, that's just a big hurdle. That's nothing. I feel like I can't tackle it. Over time, this is what I've realized, but also what other couples are reflecting. You get a little bit more easygoing on specific situations. Again, we're not talking about your values. We're not talking about boundaries, but the day-to-day communication. For example, I get up in the morning, and this morning, again, I'm not feeling like myself today. Like I feel like I'm getting sick. So I would let my partner know. And that's just the way we roll. Natural nowadays does do the same, which I find very interesting. And he's in general very good in communicating his needs. But I've come to the realization that even like small things like this, sharing how you're feeling in that very moment, and also sharing what you need if you know what it is you need right now, just along the day, along the week, has a big impact on the way you communicate as well. And also on how you appreciate your partner much more, because if you're able to to have an open communication or open conversation about how you feel, and your partner's acknowledging it and acting on your wishes, you're just like, hey, he's listening to me, I feel seen, I feel understand, like I was able to communicate what I need and he acted on it. Isn't that amazing? And it's not always the case, but every time it is the case, like it's just, you feel like, yeah, it's just adding another amazing positive feeling, and it's definitely impacting your relationship as well. And that way, I'm kind of getting off topic right now. I hope that's fine, but that way you are just like in this positive spiral where you realize, okay, I've done the step of communicating how I'm doing, what I'm feeling, what I need, why I think the way I do, and my partner is taking action. And then it's just like a trigger, and it's like every time it's just getting easier. And eventually you'll see that your partner is doing the same. Definitely takes emotional maturing on both sides. Um, that's kind of aligning with what Ruby was just sharing, that, and also a little bit with what Anna just shared, that you can do the work on your end and you can communicate and you can gather all the information that are available on specific topics. There has to be a moment where you feel that your partner is aligning with the efforts on the topic of communication, on the topic of, for example, that's another topic we'll talk about in December, actually, raising kids, family in general, setting boundaries, and all of this. So you can just do so much, and eventually you'll get to a point where you feel like, okay, I'm not getting back anything. And that's also fine. Like, as long as you stay true to yourself, as long as you make sure that your boundaries and values are not crossed, and there are certain things you might be able to bend and move towards the other direction, but there are certain things you're just simply not. And maybe that's a topic on another workshop, like topic of values, the topic of boundaries. If you feel like this would help, I'm gonna look for an expert on this topic, because yeah, that's definitely something that's quite deep, that needs a lot of work. There is just so much you can do, and I want to make sure that we're not taking this lighthearted, obviously. Like, I'm doing some jokes, talking out of my own experience, but if you do feel that you are stuck, or if you do feel like I'm the one communicating always, it's just energy draining. I can't do this anymore. Make sure that you get help as well. And maybe help as a couple, maybe help as an individual, whatever it is you need. We will just, again, in today's workshop, till the surface, and I'll give you some tools to work with. But obviously, if you feel you're stuck and there's no moving forward anymore, I really encourage you to question your boundaries, your values, but also to get help. Let's move on to the tools. The most interesting part, and I'm sure that the one or the other tool you're applying in your relationship. The first one, for example, is using I statements. It's actually also a topic we've been talking about last week. So you see there like a lot of alignments on the workshop we had on the topic of de-escalation and disagreement is to use I statement. I feel, so let's take the example on time, for example. Like I feel anxious when we're not on time because in my culture, time of others is quite valued. I need you to be on time, so I don't feel anxious about that. That's just an easy example, but obviously you can use that statement in any situation. The only thing is I would like you to make sure is that you're not using that tool to judge. So that all the tools you're seeing here should be used judgmental free. Because otherwise there's a high risk that you will get into a disagreement and that you're just getting to a point that you didn't see coming or you didn't anticipate it along with using those tools. Another tool, and we will get to that in a bit. So that's actually the next slide is active listening. So active listening is, in my opinion, the most important thing when it comes to communication. It means that I put my phone aside. It means that we sit down, we have a conversation. If there's something my partner would like to share, something that was especially heavy on him during the day, during the work day, so whatever, we put the phone away and we have a conversation. We really listen. We really listen. We make sure that, and that's the hardest part, that we don't judge or that we don't think about, or what can I say, or what's the like, how can I help him, for example. It's just sitting there and just listening. What is it your partner is trying to communicate? Again, that's also covered in the next slide. Also, asking with curiosity. If you feel like, let's take the example of time. I think that's a really good example because I know a lot of you are making the same experience. Luckily, like we got to an agreement where it's a little bit more easygoing in our relationship. But in the beginning, it was a big issue for me to really ask, like, hey, if you say 5 minutes, what does it actually mean for you? Do you mean 5 minutes or is it more like 30 minutes, you know? And another framework, what does it mean in your world? That's a good question. I remember it in my next conversation with Paul when it comes to indifference. Yeah, because again, all of our different people, experiences, culture impact. So really asking, what does it actually mean when it comes to time? When you say 5 minutes, what does it mean? Is it 5 minutes or is it eventually? And what does eventually mean? Like really making sure that you find common ground or that you understand what your partner is trying to say, kind of like a little dictionary you create over the time as well, if that makes sense. Again, in our case, I get up. The third time is the charm. Nacho says, vamos. The third time I get up, I put on my shoes, and then I know we'll go. But that was the learning curve to get there. And the ERF framework, that's actually a framework that aligns very much with active listening. Let's get to point of active listening. So this slide is going to be part of the guideline I'll send you after the workshop. Because as mentioned, active listening does not only mean to listen to your partner, but it means to pretend like you're listening, because sometimes it happens that partner wants to share something that's very important to him. Obviously, you have to know that it's important to him. So if you're unsure, please ask him, like, hey, is this actually something you would like to talk about in depth? And if he wants to talk about it in depth, don't do the dishes meanwhile, for example. Sit down, put your phone away, and just listen. And that's easier said than done. I've come to the realization because, again, there are just so many times where I just want to jump into the conversation and be just like sharing your advice, asking him, why don't you do it this and that way? Or I would approach it this and that way. Oftentimes, your partner does not want a solution. He just wants you to listen. And the other way around as well. If you feel like you had a rough day, if you feel like something is quite heavy on your mind, ask your partner, like, hey, do you have 15 minutes for me right now? Can we please sit down and really, share that right now? You just need him to listen. You don't need his advice. Or if you need his advice, ask him in the end. But all of those tips are tips you can use in your relationship for active listening. And that's a very powerful tool because it makes you seen as well and understood. What we do, and I've shared that last week as well, is that we do have those regular check-ins as well. It's also going to be part of the guideline, but we have regular check-ins where we tackle topics that were quite heavy on us. Because sometimes in that moment, or at least I do feel that way, something happens at work, for example. I might not just want to talk about it immediately, but I want to talk about it eventually when I feel like it's still like spinning in my head. It's still something I can't shake off. And then my partner is my go-to. And again, I don't expect him to bring a solution unless I ask him, but I just want him to listen. And all of this comes with no judgment as well. So no assumption, no judgment. Don't use your phone and only give advice if being asked, or ask, hey, do you want advice right now? Is there something I can support you with? Or how can I support you? Only then you're allowed to share your advice. I hope that makes sense. It's easier said than done, honestly, the topic of active listening. Because again, during the day, we're all busy. Most of us are working. We are raising kids, we are living in a different country. We're like juggling so many challenges. And then really finding the headspace to sit down and to just be like, okay, here I am. I'm fully yours. Let's just do a deep dive. Let's just do it. It's definitely something you have to learn. But in our experience, those weekly checkups or check-ins, they help a lot. The IARA method is actually something that's very much aligning with the topic of active listening as well. You can use this, especially on difficult topics, especially when there's the one or the other thing that's quite heavy on you and you would like to tackle it and have an open and honest conversation. In general, out of my experience and the experiences of other couples, and I know also easier said than done, if there's a topic that's quite heavy on you that you want to address, for example, if it's family expectations, if it's religion, if it's raising your kids, no matter what it is, make sure that you set a date for that. And it needs a little bit of preparation, to be honest, because you want to make sure that you communicate topics like this try to communicate it in a way that your partner understands where you're coming from, but that also means to be in the right headspace and to kind of have your words in order to avoid a disagreement or a heated up situation. I mean, heated up situations are totally normal as long as you're getting back afterwards. We've talked about that on the topic of disagreement, but it does need some preparation. So this method is including identifying, like asking, open-ended questions on both sides, obviously. So not you, only you making or doing all the work, showing interest and seeking understanding before being understood, making sure that there's the space as well for your partner, but the other way around as well. If it's a heavy topic, acknowledging the feelings, acknowledging that maybe this is something that's especially hard for your partner right now, and also expressing it, sharing with him, like, hey, I'm very proud of you, and hey, thank you so much that we're having this conversation right now. I know it must have been a difficult step for you to get here or to sit down with me, and I'm willing to work on that together with you. Responding by sharing your perspective or propose a solution. Again, only if you feel it's the time for proposing a solution. And obviously, it doesn't mean that it's just a one-sided conversation. Also something that needs a lot of practice. And I barely know any couple that's dating interculturally that was just able to do it from one day to the other. And then last but not least, that also comes with agreeing. Not agreeing to have the same opinion, but to agree that you will try to find common ground, for example, that you will have regular check-ins, or you will tackle that topic in 1 week from now or 2 days from now. So agreement, really want to emphasize that doesn't mean that you share same point of view. And with all of this, also something that's building over the years, you are slowly but little writing your own language. You will be able to understand better, so where the other person is coming from. You'll understand what's triggering you in a conversation. You'll understand what your partner needs in order for you to feel understand. And in general, you will understand what does he mean with, let's stick with the time example. What does he mean with 5 minutes? What does it mean when he says vamos? What does it mean, hey, it's important to me? What does it mean when he says maybe or eventually? And then obviously with that also comes, if you're speaking different languages, kind of creating your own language, which I find very interesting. So we got to a point in our relationship where, yes, we communicate in English, but sometimes we switch or we throw in some German words and then some Spanish words, and I don't even recognize my accent anymore. Yes, I might still have a German accent, but it's just sometimes a mix of different accent and also the way I express myself. Very interesting to see how my way of communication changed due to the fact that not only I am in an intercultural relationship, but also due to the fact that I've lived in different countries. Depending on who I'm talking to, my style of communication also changes. And really keeping an eye on this and really understanding why is it that I communicate the way I do is quite interesting, to be honest. So sometimes it's just amazing to ask yourself, like, how do I even got here? Including my communication style. So last but not least, another reflection prompt. Feel free to share it. I feel like I've been talking a lot. I feel like there's just so much on the topic of communication, but this is your space now to share with us, if you would like to, what you've learned about yourself, but also what it is you would like to, or you take from today's workshop, or within your relationship. I'm gonna give you 2 minutes for that. And then I'm curious what we can do in general. And I would like to use the last 2 minutes, because I know that I've opened a big topic here on the topic of communication. I don't want to take it lighthearted. Once you get the guideline, you'll see the guideline will also include great reflection prompts, but also great prompts for you as a couple, questions to ask in situations on difficult or tackling difficult topics. So I'm wondering, what is it for you? What would you need in order to feel on the topic of communication? Does this make sense? I've just noted down that one idea for a future workshop could be boundaries and values, that we do a deep dive on that. But if there's the one or the other topic we've been talking today, or I've been sharing with you, that's especially triggering you, please make sure to seek professional help as well. What helps as well in general, and I know what you are doing this actually, is to share your experience, your thoughts, your feelings in the group as well. Because what or the experience I've made, especially now that I'm quite well connected here in Buenos Aires with other women in intercultural relationships, is that it just helps as well to just talk about it with others that understand where you're coming, and they might not have the solution for you, or they will not have the solution for you, but just to talk it out with someone in a very similar situation helps a lot. And it has helped me over the past few years, actually, since building the community. And I'm also learning through the community and through my network here. Yeah, Nacho also sees my development, and he got to a point where he's very excited about it, where he's just like, what is it actually you're doing? Like, yeah, just to see like what type of impact it has on you in the long run, and kind of awakening the curiosity of your partner as well. Irina, right? I'm not a therapist either, but I feel some insecurities I had went away once I came here to see my partner and his habitat. I understood better his context. Yes, I agree. It's definitely a plus if you're able to see your partner in his natural habitat. The other way around as well definitely helps, but I understand that in especially long distance relationships, it's not always possible. If there's anything else, ladies, you would like to share in general, or any other topic, you might be interested in a workshop, maybe for next year. I have a big vision for the community. Let me know. Always feel free to text me via WhatsApp or via email, and you get the communication guideline, but you will also get the presentation from today. I hope you got some clarity on the one or the other topic, and I hope you'll use the guideline as well in order to do some deep dive. And hope to see you next week, Friday, by the way, on the topic of K1 and Schengen visa. And then on the 7th of December will be the last workshop on the topic of raising kids multilingual, which I'm also very excited about.